I am Valeria, and at 28 years old, I have lived a life that few fully understand. My story begins in the Peruvian Andes, in a small community where the air is pure and the mountains guard ancient secrets. I was adopted as a child, and although my adoptive parents gave me love, there was always a part of me searching for my roots. I grew up in Lima, a vibrant and chaotic city, very different from the stories my adoptive parents told about my birthplace. My skin, my features, my dark, straight hair, everything about me whispered an Andean heritage I couldn't deny. I often felt like a bridge between two worlds, never quite belonging to either. My adoptive parents, of European descent, were always open about my adoption, but society wasn't always as kind. From a young age, I noticed the curious glances, the whispered comments, the way people try to fit me into predefined categories. How exotic, some would say, with a mix of admiration and strangeness. Others, less tactful, referred to me as the adopted one, as if that word defined my entire existence. These labels, though sometimes said without malice, became embedded in my subconscious. They made me feel like a collector's item, something out of place in the tapestry of my own life. Despite everything, I always tried to stay strong, focusing on my studies and my passion for Andean crafts. It was my way of connecting with that distant part of me, a silent search for my own identity. Every loom, every embroidery, was a thread connecting me to an unknown yet palpable past. My early school years were a minefield of innocent comments and awkward questions. "Why is your skin darker than your parents?" children would ask, with the uninhibited curiosity of childhood. Their words, though not intended to hurt, pricked like small splinters. Adults, for their part, often praised my unusual beauty, an adjective that made me feel more like a curiosity than a person. "She just has such an exotic air about her," they would comment, unaware that this exoticism separated me from my peers. I constantly felt under a microscope. At home, my adoptive parents did their best to protect me, but they couldn't shield me from the outside world. They tried to explain that I was special, unique, but those words often clashed with the reality of playgrounds and family gatherings. The difference was undeniable and sometimes painful. I remember once, at a birthday party, a girl asked me if my real parents had given me away to my current parents. The innocence of her question didn't lessen the sting of the idea of being an object. I felt disoriented, as if my origin was a transaction. These experiences, small but constant, shaped my self-perception. I began to see my heritage as something I had to manage, a characteristic that distinguished me in a way that wasn't always positive. Identity became a puzzle with missing pieces. As I grew older, innocent questions transformed into more direct and often prejudiced comments. In adolescence, the desire to fit in is overwhelming, and my difference felt like an insurmountable barrier. The labels became heavier. "She's the adopted one, right?" I would hear in the school hallways, as if my story were gossip to be shared. The word exotic was often used to describe my appearance, but with a nuance that suggested I wasn't entirely normal or Peruvian in the traditional sense. It was a form of otherness. At social gatherings, conversations often drifted to my origin with intrusive questions about my real parents or the culture I came from. It was as if my existence was a topic of debate and anthropological curiosity for others. I felt stripped bare by their curiosity. Once, in a history class, a classmate made a derogatory comment about Andean communities, and I felt a knot in my stomach. Although he didn't attack me directly, I felt the weight of his ignorance on my shoulders. It was an attack on a part of me I was trying to understand. These moments made me withdraw, becoming more reserved about my past and my identity. I tried to go unnoticed, hoping that by not drawing attention, the comments would cease. But words, once spoken, have an echo that resonates long after. Life in Lima, with its fast pace and mix of cultures, often highlighted my uniqueness. While my friends talked about beach summers and traditional Limno family customs, I felt connected to a landscape of mountains and ancient rituals I only knew from photos. The differences were palpable. My adoptive parents, though loving, couldn't teach me about the Andean worldview, about Quechua, or about the customs of my native village. They tried, with books and documentaries, but it wasn't the same as experiencing it. There was a cultural void that I found hard to fill, a disconnection. At university, Where I studied anthropology, I hoped to find a place where my identity would be understood and valued. However, even there, my personal experience often became a case study rather than a legitimate part of my being. I was an object of analysis, not a voice. I remember a class discussion about the authenticity of indigenous cultures. Some classmates, unaware of my story, spoke disparagingly about cultural purity. I felt my own existence was questioned in that debate, as if my mixed identity were a contradiction. This constant need to justify my existence, to explain my origin, exhausted me. It made me feel that my identity was a problem to be solved, rather than a richness to be celebrated. I longed for a space where I could simply be Valeria, without labels or explanations. Despite having friends and a loving family, I often felt incredibly alone in my internal struggle. It was a solitude that came from misunderstanding, from the feeling that no one could truly grasp the duality of my identity. It was a weight I carried in silence. I tried to talk to some close friends about how the comments affected me, but their responses were often well-intentioned but superficial. "Don't listen to them," they'd say, or "they don't know what they're talking about." Their words failed to ease the sting of the wound. My adoptive parents, with all their love, sometimes minimized the impact of these words, believing that their support was enough. They didn't understand that the wound wasn't just from a lack of love, but from the constant denial or simplification of my complex identity. It was a generational gap. I became adept at hiding my feelings, at smiling and nodding, while inside I was consumed by frustration. I learned to build emotional walls, not to show my vulnerability, to avoid more comments or pitying glances. It was a defense mechanism, but also a prison. This silent solitude led me to seek solace in my art, in creating pieces that reflected my divided soul. It was my way of processing the pain, of finding beauty in complexity, and of shouting my truth without words. My workshop became my personal sanctuary. The day everything changed began like any other, with a normal routine at the university. There was a cultural art exhibition, and I had contributed some of my pieces inspired by Andean motifs. I was excited, but also nervous, about the exposure. As I explained one of my works to a small group of attendees, a woman, in her 50s with an haughty expression, approached. She had been observing me with a familiar gaze, a mix of curiosity and judgment. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Oh, how interesting," she said with a voice dripping with condescension, examining my piece. "I suppose this is part of your heritage, isn't it? You're the girl, what was it?" "Oh, yes, the exotic and adopted one." Her tone was dismissive, as if my identity were a poorly told joke. The words, spoken loudly and clearly, resonated in the small space, drawing the attention of others. I felt my face flush, shame and anger battling to escape. My hands trembled, and my voice caught in my throat, unable to respond. In that moment, the world seemed to stop. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if all my insecurities had been ripped open and laid bare for everyone to see. The gazes of those present settled on me, and I just wished I could disappear, sink into the ground. The silence that followed the woman's hurtful words felt eternal, an echo of my own powerlessness. My heart pounded in my chest, and my eyes blurred with unshed tears. I was paralyzed, unable to articulate a defense. The woman, seeing my reaction, smiled with cruel satisfaction, as if she had won an invisible battle. She prepared to add another comment, to finish her attack, enjoying my humiliation. Her gaze was one of contempt, a confirmation of my worst fear. Just when I thought I was about to collapse, a clear, firm voice broke the silence. "Excuse me, madam," a voice said from behind me, with a calm that contrasted with the tension in the air. It was a voice I didn't recognize, but it sounded with authority and conviction. I turned slowly, hoping someone would dare to defend me, but without certainty that it would happen. And there he was, a man in his mid-30s, with a serene but determined gaze, observing the woman with an expression of disapproval. In that instant, a wave of astonishment washed over me. I didn't know him, had no idea who he was, but he had dared to step in. His presence, unexpected and brave, was like a ray of light in the darkness of my shame. It was an act of pure humanity. The man took a step forward, positioning himself slightly between the woman and me, without being aggressive, but marking a clear boundary. "I find your comment not only inappropriate, but deeply disrespectful," he said, his voice resonating with quiet authority. The woman was speechless. Miss Valeria has shared her art, which is an expression of her talent and rich cultural heritage. The man continued, without raising his voice, but with every word carrying weight. Labeling her in that way, and in this context, is a lack of respect for her and her work. The woman tried to retort, stammering something about freedom of speech, but the man interrupted her with a firm gaze. Freedom of speech does not give you the right to denigrate others, especially when it comes to their identity and origin, he asserted, without hesitation. His stance was unyielding. Those present, who had been silently observing, began to murmur, some nodding in approval. The woman, visibly uncomfortable and surprised by the unexpected defense, finally retreated, her haughtiness fading into shame. The man turned to me, and for the first time, our eyes met. His eyes were kind and understanding, and he offered me a small smile. "Your art is beautiful, Valeria," he said softly, as if he wanted to erase the hurtful words with his kindness. His gesture was a balm. After the woman left, the man introduced himself as Matteo, a local art gallerist who had come to the exhibition. We spoke briefly, and he sincerely complimented me on my works, without mentioning the incident directly, but with a tacit understanding. His presence was comforting. When Matteo left, I remained alone, processing what had just happened. The shame still burned, but it was mixed with an overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude. Someone, a complete stranger, had dared to defend my dignity, to validate my existence. It was a turning point. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every word, every gesture, and realized that, for the first time, I hadn't been alone in my struggle. Matteo's intervention had not only protected me in that moment, but had opened a crack in the walls I had built around myself. The solitude dissipated. I reflected on all the times I had stayed silent, accepted hurtful comments, allowed labels to define me. I realized that my silence had been a form of complicity with the ignorance of others. It was time to change that dynamic. The incident, painful as it was, became a catalyst. It made me see that I didn't have to carry the weight of others' misunderstanding. That my identity, far from being a problem, was a source of strength and beauty. The seed of empowerment had been sown. Within a few days, Matteo contacted me to invite me to exhibit some of my pieces in his gallery. It was an unexpected opportunity, and a gesture that went beyond simple kindness. I felt it was a sign, a new path opening before me. Working with Matteo allowed me not only to showcase my art to a wider audience, but also to speak openly about my inspiration, my Andean heritage, and my personal journey. He encouraged me to use my voice, to share my story through my creations. His support was unconditional. As my art gained recognition, so did my confidence. I began to feel more comfortable talking about my adoption and my Andean origin, not as something that defined me in a limiting way, but as an integral and enriching part of who I am. It was my truth. People who came to the gallery not only admired my works, but also became interested in the story behind them. Many shared their own experiences of feeling different or misunderstood, creating a community of connection and empathy. I was not alone. This new path allowed me to transform the pain of labels into a platform for understanding and celebrating diversity. The incident at the exhibition, which had once paralyzed me, was now an anecdote I shared to inspire others. It was a complete turnaround. Over time, my art became my most powerful voice. Every piece I created was a testament to my identity, a fusion of my Andean roots and my life in Lima. I stopped seeing my origin as a dichotomy and began to see it as a beautiful synthesis. I delved deeper into Andean culture, studying Quechua, visiting communities, learning from elder artisans. Not just for my art, but for my own soul. It was a way of reclaiming my heritage, of filling that void I had felt for so long. The justice I sought was not revenge against those who had hurt me, but an affirmation of my own worth. It was to demonstrate, through my success and authenticity, that their words had no power over me. My empowerment was my answer. I even had a casual encounter with the woman from the incident on another occasion. This time, I looked her in the eyes with calm and a serene smile. She, for her part, averted her gaze, not daring to say anything. Her shame was palpable, and my strength undeniable. My story, which once made me feel vulnerable, had now become my armor. I had transformed the labels of exotic and adopted into badges of pride, symbols of a resilience I never knew I possessed. It was a personal victory, silent but profound. Today, Valeria is not just a recognized artist. I am an advocate for diversity and inclusion. My gallery has become a space for artists from different backgrounds, a place where every story is valued and celebrated. It's my way of ensuring no one else feels the way I did. The exhibition incident was the catalyst that pushed me to find my voice and to defend not only my identity, but also that of others. I learned that true strength lies not in avoiding pain, but in transforming it into purpose. My vulnerability became my greatest strength. I have given talks at schools and universities, sharing my story and encouraging young people to embrace their own unique identities. My message is clear. Your worth is not determined by the labels others put on you, but by the truth you carry within. The liberation I feel now is immense. I no longer hide, no longer apologize for who I am. I am Valeria, with my Andean roots and my life in Lima, a woman who has found her place in the world, not despite her differences, but because of them. If you are listening to this and feel misunderstood or labeled, remember that your story is your power. Don't wait for someone to defend you. Become your own defender. Embrace what makes you unique, because in that uniqueness lies your true beauty and purpose.